Esta conferencia comenzará a grabarse.
So, welcome to this session of the European Alliance Against Coronavirus. It's important to say that we are recording this session, and this video will be published in the channels of the European Cluster Alliance and also in the ECCP, the European Cluster Collaboration Platform. So if you remain with us, you are accepting that. Today, we are going to go deep in the new developments on the mobility, transport, automotive ecosystem. That is a topic that has been covered several times during the past year, and with in fact Morgan, Guillaume, and we are very, very glad to return to it. It's critical today and to have an update on it. So thank you, Morgan, for joining us. And also we have with us Alberto Cominges and Borja da Pena from the cluster CEAGA in Galicia, Spain, that will share with us the practical side of the reality at cluster level in this ecosystem. So thank you to all of you, and without any more introduction, Morgan, the floor is yours. You are muted at this moment, Morgan.
Good morning. Good. Do you hear me better?
Perfect. It's perfect.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I will put my I'm trying to share my screen.
Yes, we are seeing it now. It's perfect.
Great. So good morning, everybody. I'm very happy to participate again in these meetings organized by Antonio and team. As mentioned by Antonio, I had the pleasure already to present you twice what was the situation and the work at the European Commission at DG GROW in my unit and in with other DGs and at the broad level about the mobility, transport, and automotive ecosystem. And today, the focus would be to update you on the situation now that we are entering, I think, a new phase after the deepest part of the crisis last year. So please, I will try to make this presentation quite interactive, but don't hesitate to ask questions. I think we will have a slot for questions at the end of the presentation. And to make it interactive, I would be very happy to answer your questions. So I'm trying. Okay, so just as a short introduction to recap on what the mobility, transport, and automotive ecosystem is, you may all know that it's one of the 14 industrial ecosystems which has been identified and presented as part of the EU industrial strategy earlier in March 2020. This strategy has been recently updated, so I will come back on it from the perspective of these ecosystems. It's one of the key ecosystem and the two pictures here illustrate how important it is in terms of value added and employment in particular. One very important point is also that it's clearly one of the most integrated ecosystem in the EU value chain, and therefore of critical interest for the EU single market. You may know also that it's quite a broad ecosystem, and I will not have time to go on all the details of each of these components, but it covers productions of not only motor vehicles, so the automotive, but also ships, trains, railways, accessories, and not only the production, but the repair, the maintenance, and the freight transport. And it embraces and encompasses, as any of these 14 ecosystems, all the players in the value chain, which for this ecosystem is quite significant, and for you clusters it's of major importance. So not only the big companies, but also the startups, the SMEs, the OEMs, academia, the service, and also public sector actors. I have organized the presentation in 3 parts. First, to give you an overview of the takeaways and the impact of the COVID-19 crisis as of today. I will then quickly go on the updated industrial strategy I just mentioned, to highlight what I think is of particular interest for you as clusters and in the context of this specific mobility ecosystem. And I will finally give you an update of the next generation EU package state of play and the implementation of the resilience and recovery plans for the EU member states. So let's go to the impact and takeaway of the COVID-19 crisis. Here, I didn't want to bother you with a lot of figures. As I said, our ecosystem encompasses a lot of players, all impacted by the COVID crisis at different levels, and also a lot of activities and areas. So the idea of this slide is more to remind you of the general context, and to see how it interacts with the automotive ecosystem and how important it is. Indeed, as has been stated notably as part of the presentation of the updated industrial strategy, the decline of the COVID-19 crisis is unprecedented for the economy, 6.3%, but also, it means 60% of SMEs which have been impacted in terms of turnover and full of EU trade in Q2 and Q3 2020 up to 24%. Also, big impact on SME employment decrease in 2020, 1.4 million jobs, and a reduction of investment. Knowing how important and crucial is the investment gap for the mobility ecosystem, this is of particular importance, but also because this ecosystem represents 14.6 million jobs in the EU and 7.5% of the added value in the EU, and 99% of the SMEs, as you all know, as a cluster interested participants. So due to that, there has been, of course, an unprecedented drop in sales, registrations, and production for the ecosystem in all activities which I previously mentioned for all players, but more particularly the most hit have been the suppliers and the OEM and the SMEs. There is also currently a rebound, which would be differentiated from one country to the other and from one area to the other area of activities, but still quite impressive if we look at the recent figures for vehicles registration, for instance. I had a quick look this morning before we had this presentation, and for instance, you can see that the EU passenger car registrations has increased by 24% into 2021. The same for the commercial vehicle registrations. So we have an increase just for April of 180%, which is quite significant. Of course, compared to 2020, where this was quite low, but there is a rebound. What is important is also to notice some positive facts, and I will go on this on the next slide. So one of the major trends which can be noticed further as part of this current period further to the crisis is that we have definitely entered an accelerated technological transformation, and the challenges which were quite disruptive for the whole ecosystem are addressed tangibly by the various key players. I'm speaking about electrification, hydrogen, connectivity, automation, data. What is extremely positive is that there has been a strong uptake of the electrification, and the sale of electric cars have surged in the EU, more particularly in the EU, and it is said to be a long-term trend now. Some European manufacturers have announced that they will only sell electric vehicles by 2030, and we have on average 10% of the cars sold last year which were electrics or plug-in, which means 5 times more than in 2018. So that's definitely a positive and long-term trend. You can see from the pictures above that still there is some discrepancy, for instance, compared to Norway, and there are quite a lot of differences and discrepancies which need to be worked out from one member state to the other. Points to be noticed also relates to the fact that in terms of positioning, the MTA is still, let's say, is representative in terms of impact of the crisis and the patterns it took from 2020 Q1 to 2020 Q4. You can see it here. If you look at the impact on turnover, you see that the MTA has been impacted right after the tourism and textile sector, for instance, and the proximity, social economy and civil security ecosystem. So it's clearly one of the most hit, but it's also, let's say, in between, which is very representative also of the challenges and opportunities which are at stake. And you can see that one major indicator which we are following also, the confidence indicator, is very representative for the MTA, which is also in the lower part here, but progressing along the common trend in the EU. What I would say here is that in terms of confidence, this indicator does not show the magnitude of the changes which we have noticed, and the importance of these changes for all players in the ecosystem, as well as the opportunities and perspectives it offers. I'm referring here to the change in the patterns of consumers, for instance, or the new city mobility concept. So these are trends which will obviously impact these indicators such as the confidence indicator in the long term, and the growth of the ecosystem also, and its transformation. And I could also, of course, mention the digital transformation, the automation, also the automation of the manufacturing supply chain and the manufacturing processes. So we have, for instance, ambitious objectives to make to keep the position of the EU manufacturers and suppliers as a global market leader in semi-automated vehicles. I will go now to the industrial strategy. I hope I'm not too long. How much time is left, Antonio?
Please
Hello?
go on, Morgan. You are welcome. The information
Okay.
is very important. Don't hesitate to extend your presentation. It's very important. Thank you.
So I will go now that we have had this this overview and the state of play on the crisis and the perspective for the future at the beginning of 2021 to the recent update of the European industrial strategy from the perspective of our ecosystem again. So as you all know, the Commission has published in March 2020 an industrial strategy, which has been a major, which is a major reference document for us and our stakeholders. And this has been updated recently on the 5th of May. I think you had information that there was a previous presentation by my colleague Marek on this strategy. So I will not go into the details of it, but try to focus again on some tangible and practical insights which are of relevance for the MTA ecosystem. Just to recap first, that still, and that's of importance for this ecosystem, that the industrial strategy update last May was focused and has restated the fact that Europe is embarking on the transitions towards climate neutrality and digital leadership, and that we need to ensure that the European industry can lead the way as we enter this new age. So we are speaking here about global competitiveness. What was it more particularly about? That's of particular interest for the ecosystem. It included a review of Europe's strategic dependencies and the strategic capacity needs, and discovered areas which were quite diverse and relevant for your industry, such as microelectronics, cloud and data services, batteries, hydrogens and raw materials. So I wanted to I will not, as I say, go into the details of this strategy, but I would just like, while starting to speak about it, to recall some words of President von der Leyen, which she delivered during this year's edition of the Industry Days, speaking about our mobility ecosystem more particularly. She said we should move from crisis mode to a new cruising speed of cooperation with European industries. With my colleague Frans Timmermans, we are currently reflecting on how we can bring together the mobility, transport and automotive industry, including its backbone of SMEs, policymakers, regions and all relevant stakeholders to jointly reach the objectives of carbon neutrality, digital leadership and resilience. Because this industrial revolution will affect each industrial ecosystem differently, our response needs to be tailored accordingly. I think this is the key big helicopter message for the industrial strategy and for our ecosystem, and I wanted to remind that starting to speak about it. Now let's go more into the details. You have here more a kind of mapping of how the mobility, transport and automotive ecosystem position itself in view of these big ambitions I just mentioned. It is important to start from the current situation, note the competitiveness and challenges. So what is clearly identified is the reliance on Asia for batteries and semiconductors, the need to go circular, the need to regulate automated vehicles, the objective for more cleaner electricity, and the objective for upskilling and reskilling. I already also mentioned the huge investment challenges which can be which have been assessed as reaching 50 billion for each manufacturer for green and digital only, and this refers to the private investment need, not to the public investment need. In terms of inputs, what do we have, and how will we go through the pathway designed by this updated strategy? We will have to focus on clean and automated technologies, raw materials, critical components, and skilling. The objective only for the automotive industry is to reskill up to 700,000 workers. There are some tools which are important to cover the investment needs. I will go later on more in details on the next generation package EU, and more particularly on what is called the RRF, so the Resilience and Recovery Facility. But I would like to insist here more particularly on Horizon Europe, Invest EU, which will be delivered notably through the European Investment Bank, the important projects of common European interest, which are restated in this new updated strategy, and also just transition funds and the EU taxonomy, which has been published in 2020, and with a recent delegated act being published on climate mitigation and climate adaptation, where you find specific activities dealing with the mobility ecosystem, this being key, I think, the future for raising private funds and capital for the mobility ecosystem. Of course, in terms of collaborative policy making, there are the alliances. I guess you all know about the battery alliances and the hydrogen alliances. There will be some further work on new alliances, which are native, for instance, semiconductors. And we also have a window which deals with policy, so key measures to be delivered and implemented. We already have the CO2 standards. They will be reinforced, Euro 7, the Clean Vehicles Directive, and the Alternative Fuels and Infrastructure Directives. There will be also follow-up on fleet renewal schemes and emission trading system, End-of-Life Vehicles Directive, and the Automated Vehicles rules. There will be also another window which deals with actions for level playing fields, so integration of global dimension into the EU competition law, access to third countries' public procurement, FDI screening, which means forest direct investment, and the carbon border adjustment mechanism. So that's quite an important dashboard which we have in mind going to through this digital and twin transformation, and the objectives and goals are quite ambitious and have been restated. They are shown here on the right hand side of this slide. So for instance, the EU should be self-sufficient by 2025 in batteries. There should be a tangible decrease of CO2 of at least 37.5 and decrease of pollutant emissions by 50%, NOx and particles. One last slide for on the strategy, which is about lessons learned from the MTA ecosystems and how this strategy updates, illustrates the importance and the key role played by this mobility ecosystem in the EU, and also the fact that it paved the way in many aspects, and it was one of the ecosystems on which it was built to elaborate these main messages of the strategic of the European Industrial Strategy update. These main messages are that dependency should not be limited to projects. Strategic capacities in key technologies is essential to deliver on these twin transitions, and we have strengths and weaknesses. We are highly competitive in some areas, but quite dependent in others, and this has to be worked out, and there are some tangible proposals behind, including in the mobility ecosystem. We can also build on successful examples. Let's start with that. I have tried to illustrate it in this slide. You can see that in terms of success and wins for the MTA, the batteries is checked. So the objective behind is to be number 2 manufacturing of lane batteries by 2024. This is supported by the alliance I just mentioned. For the hydrogen, it's also clearly related to the mobility ecosystem. The objective would be to have half of electrolyzers manufacturers in the EU, including the larger ones. And this means having the tangible, having the supply chain localized in the EU. We already have some good progress and success, both for the hydrogen and the batteries. In terms of advanced manufacturing, the objectives are high for patents, and the recent lesson learned from the 2018-2020 period shows that the role of the mobility ecosystem has been fundamental. For instance, a lot of patents, and most of the innovation effort in patents, reflected in patents, results from batteries and electricity storage, mostly for consumer, for mass consumption electric vehicles. We also have in some areas of weaknesses, as I said earlier, which are semiconductors and cloud. You see that here there would be some similar objective, sorry for that. And ambitions which are quite high for the EU. I think that's most of the message for the updated industrial strategy. I would like to close this presentation with, as I said earlier, a short presentation of the RFF and the next generation EU package. We already had 2 sessions on it. I will try to be, as I was the last time, quite practical and tangible, spotting and shedding the light on what is of interest for you, not only in terms of, let's say, measures and financing, but also on practically how you can navigate in this RFF, maybe to find some ideas, some opportunities, and address some challenges on the ground. So stock taking of this next generation EU package and the RFF, you all know that this is, I guess that you all know that is a key instrument which has been put on the table by the EU as part of the recovery package to support all member states. And it's, in a nutshell, it amounts to 672.5 billion of financial support, just to public investments and reforms, meaning that behind that there should be a leverage and acceleration of the private investment. And we are working together with member states who are in the driving seat to design their plans, to implement and monitor them. So when we discussed it last time, I mentioned that we were expecting I mean, we were still in the middle of the way, and there has been some big progress. I would strongly recommend that you go on this page, which is on this slide, which is available under the link I have mentioned below, where you can follow up what is going on and the plans which are presented by the various member states. And that's also where you will find the analysis and the assessment of the European Commission's as well as keynotes, including for sustainable transport, which is one of the major priority and challenge identified as part of countries' specific recommendations, but also what we call the flagships. And here for you, the mobility ecosystem, what is particularly important, as I may have mentioned earlier, is recharge and refuel, which deals with the objective for the charging infrastructure, but also scale up and reskill flagship. Here I have put with a star all the plans which are already available on this site. If you want to go into the details on them, you can go on this site, but in terms of contents, we have received so far 20 plans. Some member states are a little bit late, but it's quite very good in terms of progress and also in terms of contents. To sum up at the level of mobility ecosystem, there are measures and both for investments and reforms in all the plans. There are some significant amounts. I will show you some countries for illustration later on. But let's say that most of the plans cover at least trains, railways, cities, so urban and suburban transport challenges and investment needs, and the automotive. And in several plans, you have significant measures for the shipping industry and the maritime also. So I cannot go into the details of each plan and give you a broad picture because by definition, it's tailored for each country. But let's say that the common trend and the common contents can be summarized like that. So we are on track for the implementation and how we should translate into addressing the twin transition challenges. You may recall this slide I already presented. So all these measures I mentioned, particularly for the automotive, but I mean, you can see some connection with railway, trains and shipping also, because you also have the issue of clean transport there, of electrification, of digitalization, of hydrogen, future-proof technology. So this picture is just to illustrate the itinerary, the journey towards we go through, thanks to and which will be accelerated thanks to the RFF, now translated at the level of each member state's plan. What is good is to see that we are on track for the time scale. You may remember that the timeline was quite ambitious, and it did not only all the package has been delivered at the level of European institutions by the 3 institutions, but as I said, the member states are now delivering on the plans. What is important for you is to follow now these plans and to know that they will be implemented and follow over the period 2020-2023. Which means that when when member states will commit in their plans, and this is reflected in the plans mentioned in the previous slide, they will commit with a roadmap and milestones which are tangibly provided in the plans and which have to be delivered before 2023. That's of particular importance, and which means that you should see on the ground on the ground, tangible measures and calls for projects in particular during this period, which translate these measures into reality on the ground. I have difficulty. I wanted to show you some examples and illustrations at the end of this presentation, and I choose the Italian, French, German, and Spanish plans to show you how it looks. So I took some snapshot of the components. You can see that for all of them, the presentation and the structure may be different, but you find generally elements on the mobility ecosystem, not as such. You would not find measures for the mobility ecosystems, but you will find some windows and some components in each plan where there are tangible measures of significant amount for the ecosystem. So you can see, for instance, the German plan that the first component includes a key element, notably on e-mobility and infrastructure. You can see that its importance in terms of allocation, because it's 40% of the total amount, and the components more particularly 1.2, but you have several measures behind which are quite detailed, which are quite practical, and with tangible milestones and objectives to be achieved. The same for the French plan. You will find things in the green infrastructure and mobility, notably for the e-mobility, but of course in both plans, and that's a part of particular importance, other aspects and dimensions of the plans will have impact on the mobility ecosystems. So for instance, the digitalization of the economy and the infrastructure part, the modern administration and the financing of companies. There are a lot specifically addressing SMEs, research, and territorial cohesion. This is also the case for the Spanish plans, which is and the Italian plans, which are the Spain and Italy, as you know, are the countries which will receive the most important amount of money under these RRPs. You see here in the Spanish plan that I have put arrows where there are direct measures for the mobility ecosystem. So in this plan, it is really tailored for the needs of the Spanish recovery. And you can see that it's presented in a different manner, but that's quite interesting. You would find the same kind of measures, so trains, infrastructure, and e-mobility. Again, for the Spanish plan, important to note that, for instance, it's just an example. You also have the third components on energy transition, where there would be obviously a bridge, the green transformation of the mobility ecosystem. There are also big elements for SMEs, science and innovations, and digitalization, which will have an impact. And in the Italian plan, the snapshot here is quite short, but there is a big dimension in railway and train to be noticed. So this plan is particularly interesting from this perspective, but also for e-mobility and infrastructure. I think that the last slide illustrates now in a snapshot how you can position yourself when thinking from the perspective of the mobility ecosystem in these plans if you just focus on the green components of the national RRPs. Again, the examples I choose because also we cannot go into the details. The plans are under assessment, and we also have only 20 plans. We have 20 plans submitted. We are still reviewing them. So the examples are just Italy, France, Germany, and Spain, but that's quite representative of all the plans, and that's also quite representative on how you can analyze these plans. You see that the green infrastructure and mobility is a core part, right? It's in gray here, in France, in Italy and Spain, and also in Germany. And it goes together and it's combined with green energy, which, as I mentioned, would have also a direct impact, and with cohesion and innovation. So actually, there's innovation in many of these parts, even if it's not in light blue, but there are some plans which have a focus on specific measures for innovations, let's say it like that. All this impact the mobility ecosystem, and when we try to take an helicopter view of the plans to assess them according to the 11 screening criteria we are given, we have this kind of mapping and assessment grid in mind, particularly for the mobility ecosystem. So I wanted to give you this snapshot as a conclusion and to open the discussion and the questions and the presentation of my colleague afterwards. Thanks for your time and listening to this presentation.
Thank you very much to you, Morgan.
I'll just one last thing still. Sorry, in this last slide, I did provide you for some examples for the next step for you, where you, for instance, you can see a plan, a site which is quite advanced, which is France, where you would have a link to the calls for projects. So that's the next step. And I also wanted to remind you, sorry for that, that we have these plans these are not alone in the landscape, so they go together with previous measures, with the national plans, and with other instruments such as the TENT, the structural funds, and so on. And you can see here on the right hand side what has been financed on the same topics outside of it. So if you want to be practical on the floor, this goes together with also these other sources of information. Thank you.
You are very welcome, Morgan. Thank you very much to you. And we will come back to you very soon, very soon. But now I will give the floor to Alberto and Borja da Pena from CEAGA. And after hearing them, we will open the dialogue for the attendance. So, thank you, and the floor is yours, Alberto.
Hi, good morning. Thank you, Antonio and Nina, European Cluster Alliance, and thank you, Morgan Guillou, for your presentation. Well, I don't know if you're already seeing the presentation. So, okay, I will start. So, well, in 2020, I mean, vehicle production in Europe suffered a 22% of drop due to the impact of COVID-19. So it was a dramatic impact. Well, according to estimation of market intelligence, companies that work for us, for CEAGA, oil production is expected to grow by 12% this year in 2021. So we expect to reach, as you can see in the picture, almost 19 million cars this year. So recovering only part of the almost 5 million cars lost last year. So production figures for the first quarter of this year have been even better than expected. But as you can see, it is not expected to return to the pre-pandemic production levels in the short term. So main challenges for this year. Well, we are facing a very important problem, managing our supply chain, automotive supply chain. It's affecting the whole automotive ecosystem, that is the semiconductor shortage. So today, almost all OEMs in Europe have stopped their production. Well, you must know that an average car has between 50 and 150 chips per car. Well, they are used in a growing number of applications. I mean, driver assistance systems, navigation controls. And when the pandemic forced automakers to temporarily close their factories last year, pues the semiconductor manufacturers reallocated the excess of production capacity to companies that make smartphones, tablets, this kind of, gaming devices. And when car sales recovered faster than expected, automakers responded by increasing production. But they were at the end of the chip line. So the biggest impact is taking place in Europe this year of the problem of the semiconductors. And I don't know why, but Europe is the most impacted. Our situation is much worse than the US and China. And we are losing 0.5 million cars that are not being produced and should be. So let's see what happens in the rest of the year. So the shortage of other materials such as steel is also a problem, a very important problem. So we have problems also with plastics, with resins, with adhesives, and there are also problems with the transportation, also with the price of containers. And the three challenge is this one was before. It's not a new one, but it's very important because it's the entry into force of the new emissions regulations that oblige manufacturers not to exceed the average of 95 grams per kilometer of CO2. So this is very important. It started in 2020 in Europe, and those companies, those OEMs that do not comply, will have to pay important penalties. And you know that EU established that in 2025, 15% of all cars should be electric or plug-in hybrids. So this is also a difficult situation. We'll see later. So, well, a quick flash of the Galician automotive ecosystem. We have almost 25,000 direct employees. Total employment is more than 52,000 people in Galicia. This is the turnover of more than 10,000 million. Exports, as you can see, is very important. Is extremely high. And this is the last figure that is a real problem. Our investments last year were only 137 million euros. Normally, we are investing an average per year of 600 million per year. So, Morgan already said it. This is important. This is the presence of the automotive industry. Companies have stopped and reduced and decreased dramatically investments. So, and this is affecting the whole automotive ecosystem. So, we are also working a lot in trying to help small and medium enterprises. We have 67 SMEs. We have 53 startups that were created in our accelerator program, BFA. So, and we have 64 large companies. So we are working hard together to try to overcome this situation. So in this picture, you see the complete ecosystem. So we have the OEM, that is the most productive manufacturing plant in Spain, Stellantis, better known as PSA Group, the center of Vigo. And we have in the center the bunch of suppliers, the main value chain. Is very complete what we have in Galicia, a lot of companies. And you have also the auxiliary industry. There are the companies that are they are providing services, processes. They are not making directly components that are inside the car that they are very important to make that the whole ecosystem works well. So in the surroundings, we have, of course, the University of Vigo, which is very important. This is important. We have the port of Vigo too, that is ranking #1 in Spain, also in the transportation of cars using the maritime highways. We are creating and consolidating a digital innovation hub for the whole industry of Galicia, not just automotive and mobility, for all the different industries. We have a Galician Technical Center created in 2002 with 800 people working in R&D to provide and to help companies especially small and medium enterprises, to support their R&D activities. Well, in the right part, you see our headquarters. We are a small organization, but we have almost 20 people working here to make the strategic automotive plan happens, and want to create what we call success stories and cooperational projects. We created also the Ceaga Corporate University to invest in training and talent, and we think that is the most important. And in the right and down part of the slide, you can see the Business Factory Auto. So it's a program that is 6 years old, and it's our main goal of this program is to contribute, to complete our value chain, to complete the mobility and automotive ecosystem. And we were able to create 53 companies that they employ directly almost 500 digital jobs, and they have a turnover of 82 million euros. They are exporting, most of them, they are exporting their products and services, and they are helping, we are developing an innovative and entrepreneurial ecosystem, taking into account the new mobility concepts and preparing ourselves for the future. Well, it's not so important, but we receive, it's an accelerator that is different from others that are working. For me, the key is that connects the needs of knowledge of the traditional companies with the resources and the knowledge of digital startups. So this is when we receive different awards. The last one was this month in May. The government of Spain awarded Ceaga and Business Factory Auto with the first National Sustainable Mobility Award. Well, this is the investments and R&D and what is happening in the automotive industry in general. So is what the companies, is where the companies are investing and how much they are investing. So as you can see, mobility and the new mobility is key. Autonomous car and autonomous driving, infotainment and cockpit, connected car, security systems. So we have many challenges, and we have to we have important challenges to overcome, both in both sides. I mean, in the product part of the car and also in the process of manufacturing. So it's important that the wheel still keep in motion, and we cannot afford, honestly, we cannot afford to stop investments, both in product and in process. So, well, next generation, well, nothing to add. Morgan was very clear. We created a program, a common program. It's called Ancora. Ancora is a Latin word which means anchor in English, anchorage. So in this, well, it was created by our OEM, Stellantis, together with the cluster, which is FEAGA, and also with our knowledge provider, which is CETAR. So what we want is, by basically, this is the, you can read the challenge. By basically, what we want is firstly to survive. I mean, basically to support SMEs in Galicia to help them to survive. So our bet is the factory of the present. And in a second step, of course, we want to be ready for the factory of the future, which is, of course, digital, green, and prepared for electrical with hydrogen and well, all the items that with R&D and well, new processes. But we think that well, the economic impact of COVID-19 was very important for the automotive industry. Some companies are in a dramatic situation, and their economic situation is weak. And we think that to overcome this situation, we have to be creative. I mean, we have to create something new. We need different ingredients, of course. R&D and green, digital is something we need for the future. But we have to overcome. I mean, also the present. And in my humble opinion, so we need more cooperation. We need clusters, we need cooperative projects, we need decrease bureaucracy, and we have to think that SMEs have many and important difficulties to access grants for next generation and for local and national authorities. I mean, small and medium enterprises, what they need mainly is a contract. I mean, and we have to think together, maybe with ECA, and this kind of opportunities are a good opportunity to think together. How can we help SMEs to survive at the beginning and then to be prepared for the future. I am just thinking, for instance, instruments like cascade funding. Well, as I said, cooperative projects. I mean, we have to think that how we are able together to be sure that all the steps of the value chain, especially the weaker steps, I mean, small and medium enterprises, receive our support. Well, this is the Autoancora, the most important items. I mean, number one is investments. It's very important. It's very important to boost investments. Number two is logistics, or mobility, as Morgan said. But well, in this case, logistics, I mean, I understand from logistics, inbound logistics, outbound logistics, and also in-house logistics. Number three is training. Number four, I mean, manufacturing excellence. We continue to manufacture. I mean, in my opinion, well, R&D, especially innovation, is not possible if you are not manufacturing. I mean, so research and development, if you are not able to translate it to the market, I mean, for me, is money that is expensive. I mean, it's not an investment. And so we have to focus on innovation. But remembering always that we are manufacturing and we have to achieve excellence. And number 5 is attracting and creating innovation units of private of companies. Number 6 and 7 has to be with testing facilities for new cars and for new mobility. And for me, that's it. Thank you to everyone, and I'm ready for questions.
Thank you. Muchas gracias, Alberto. And congratulations, because you are an example for all of us, what you are doing, what your cluster is doing. And so it's excellent to have your reference. So, Morgan, I don't know if you have time to keep with us for some more minutes.
Yes, of course.
That would be wonderful. At least we could have a small dialogue. The presentation has been very important, very deep, but I think that it's good if we can have now some opinions and questions from the attendants. Perhaps Alan Whiteside, would you share your question?
Yes, thanks, Antonio. Thanks for the presentation, Morgan. And I think you kind of answered it when you showed the model for France, but I was wondering what considerations are given in the recovery plan and the national plans that rural needs and opportunities are distinctly different from urban regions. And the focus I found in the EU Green Deal was more on the urban needs rather than the rural.
You're muted. Sorry, Morgan, you're muted.
Thanks for your question, Alan. Yeah, so just I think there are several the rural dimension is actually addressed quite well, both in at the level of the European Commission package itself, and in the way it is we see it as translated into the realities of the plans. I will give you some. I can give you some elements like, for instance, at the level of the packages itself and the accompanying documents, there are several dimensions covering respectively the rural needs and the urban needs. It's true that urban regions needs are clearly identified as part of green transformation in particular, but rural needs are also addressed. I'm thinking, for instance, on some guidance we prepared on the DNSH test addressing fleet renewals, trucks, etc. Also, what has to be kept in mind is the whole package at the Commission level, as I think I mentioned quickly, but the whole package has been designed to put the member states in the driver's seat and is following the EU semesters. And in the EU semester, on a country-by-country basis, there is clearly a need depth analysis of what is needed for rural areas and what is needed for urban areas. And there are some countries where there are some specific challenges identified as regards rural needs, where it is translated into what we call country-specific recommendations. So you would find the term sustainable transport, but in the details of the country-specific recommendation and the EU semester report, you will find some clear explanations and assessment and analysis of where these concerned member states would need to go in terms of rural needs, and particularly for investment and reforms when needed, of course. So it's really tailored and targeted on a country-by-country basis, and that's what has to be really followed and monitored now, also in terms of implementation until 2023. We could see already that it is becoming a reality, because there are some plans in these, especially in these countries where there are some needs, and especially in the mobility ecosystem, where it is clearly highlighted. I will take the example of Spain. Spain, as I tried to explain, but I could not go into the details, but you may remember in my presentation, there are at least 3 components which are addressed in Spain. And the first one is purely urban. And the third one, or the second one, I don't remember which one, but it's called mobility/long distance. And that's clearly addressing the rural situation. I will not go into the details, but you would find these same kind of things. For instance, I have in mind Hungary. In Hungary, we have seen that there are some measures for buses, and specifically for school buses. And actually, these school buses will go to the rural areas. So you see, it's targeted. I'm thinking of Belgium, where you have a lot of infrastructure measures which are tailored. I mean, here for each region, and in each region, it can be rural and urban, and it can be high distance, long distance or not. And you would find this from different perspectives and tailored for each member state, but it's definitely addressed, and it's definitely addressed specifically for each specific needs of rural and urban areas. I hope it's addressing your question.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other question, comment? Alberto,
yes,
from your side?
Yes, okay. Antonio, can I have a very short question to Alberto Domingues? Alberto, as you know, the cooperation between Northern Portugal and Galicia in terms of automotive is very high, especially because there are lots of Spanish companies in Northern Portugal, especially in Minho, near the frontier. How do you see, after this pandemic crisis, this experience of cooperation in the future?
Yes, we have our companies. I mean, the FIA companies has as you said, Jaime has invested a lot, especially in the north of Portugal. We have a close cooperation. 40 new companies were created in Portugal with Galician-based companies, and I think this is getting much more important in the future also. So we are complementing each other, and we are, I think, in Europe, a best practice of close cooperation cross borders. I think is the right word. So Galicia and Portugal, I mean, will be able, I think, in my humble opinion, to get deeper in this close cooperation and to promote each other's business. I have a question for Morgan. I don't know, if, Antonio, if you have the time. Morgan, I know this is a very difficult question, but I mean, companies, and especially small and medium enterprises, they need visibility especially with next generation funds, and they are, I mean, expecting and calling all of us almost every day. If we have more information, and well, you said it before many times. I mean, on the ground. I mean, so I don't know if you can tell. I know that it's a national issue in many cases. I don't know if you could be more. I mean, a little bit practical regarding if you know some mechanisms, specific mechanisms and specific measures, or in the intensity of aids, or I don't know if you are able to provide us with some information, because we are creating a portfolio of projects for companies. Well, and they need I mean visibility. I mean this is not I know this is not easy, but I don't know if you are able to provide us with some info on this matter.
Actually, I tried to point and touch that in the presentation by first showing you the site of the Commission. As you say, it's national plan based, and the ownership of the member states is important. Still, you will see going through each plan and inter-plan assessment, the importance of the governance and the fact that the milestones and implementation steps are extremely detailed and assessed by the Commission, would give you information from this perspective. Because, for instance, given the timeline, the member state and the need to invest in the whole package, the member states came to us with big components heading so far, and inside you will find details for each components which follow the same structure and the same pattern for each member states. And in this you would see how there are some headings, particularly on milestones and governance, where you would see how this will translate into reality. And you may remember that that's why at the end of the presentation, maybe I should show you again. May I show my
now
my screen again? Okay. So I will show you. You may remember this last slide. So it was actually aimed at that, to show you that, and this will be the case for many member states who have these components on green mobility, addressing particularly the automotive, the railway and train. There would be calls for projects. You see that France, for instance, has already selected 98 projects, but this all is explained in the each plan, and is the member states would explain how they interact with stakeholders and how they intend to launch each milestone. In some countries, they have already selected providers for some measures. You have to go on a case-by-case basis for that, but there are clear structures which help you in the plans to find the answers, and there would be elements in the assessment also. There will be also elements in the monitoring as regards the implementation and the governance and the relationship with the stakeholders. And what I think for SMEs, yeah, one important point. Actually, we work nights and days on these plans, currently analyzing them from different perspectives. And that's also why I insisted in my presentation that, let's say that the RFF is here to accelerate and leverage. It's the visible piece of the iceberg, but the rest has to go with it. So you also have to think about the complementary financing, the private financing, the EIB, what has been done as part of the previous stimulus package. That's why I introduced this slide at the end. So there are a lot of things which are done for SMEs with specific funds like Just Transition, the structural funds, TNT. But also in these plans submitted by the member states, there is a part where the member states explain how the measures combined and how they think it should go to accelerate private investment when applicable. So you would have information there. Go to the site and also to the assessment documents and to the European semester documents. And the Commission will also publish, as their monitoring goes on and implementation regularly on this, there will be regular reports and monitoring. If you have questions, don't hesitate to reach out with us, and maybe I don't know, I could make other presentations, and my colleagues will also do so, and we'll keep you informed on how we progress, but we have the point of the SMEs in mind. I hope I did answer more in details to your question.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Morgan.
Thank you very much, Morgan. We will share this video with our clusters and through our channels. I'm sure that it will be viewed for a lot of them, very useful, and we continue in our dialogue with you if you want, and looking forward for the implication of clusters in the recovery plans and in your activities. Thank you very much again. Thank you also, Alberto and Borja.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.